Welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a couple more minutes. Hello everyone. Welcome to our Docusign developer webinar, OAuth for Connect Webhooks. My name is Melissa Marsh from our developer programs marketing team, and I'll be moderating and running our backroom logistics today. Next slide, please. I'm here with Alan Rosa, product manager, who will be presenting and demoing, along with Cameron Lowen, senior programmer writer, and Cole Kleinstuber, senior developer support engineer, who will address questions via the Q&A box throughout the session and after the demo when we open up the floor to questions. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. Now, before we get started, I have a few quick housekeeping items to go over. You are placed in listen-only mode, and this session is being recorded. You'll receive an email in about a week with a link to the webinar recording, along with other resources. Please be sure to use the Q&A button to ask questions at any time, as you see here on the screen. Feel free to ask questions if they occur to you, and we'll answer via the Q&A box or let you know we'll answer them live after the demo. To copy and save your questions and answers, simply right-click on them and copy and save to your desktop or document. Next slide, please. Now, is this webinar right for you? Well, this is a webinar for developers. If you're not a developer, you're more than welcome to stay, or you can check out our Docusign 101 course at events.docusign.com/Docusign101. And I'll drop that into the chat box for you. There we go. And next slide. All right, this is just our safe harbor notice. All of the values, email addresses, keys, secrets, tokens, and other personal information you might see here today are for demo purposes only and will be deleted or revoked after the webinar. Now you should see a quick poll on your screen in just a moment. If you can answer those questions, that will help us understand where you are in your development journey, and enable us to customize content for this and future webinars. All right, that's it.
Melissa, you muted. Was there something else?
Oh, that's it for housekeeping. Go ahead and take it away, Alan.
Thanks, Melissa. The poll popped up for me. Hi, everyone. My name's Alan Rose. I'm the product manager for Connect at Docusign. Been the PM for about 3 years. So I want to cover a lot of changes we've implemented the last 3 years and then focus on the new OAuth solution that we have. So first, we'll cover how Connect works today. We'll talk about Legacy 1.0 Connect. We'll cover some of the 2.0 stuff we launched last year. And then we'll cover the security options we have, the different OAuth solutions that the industry has built, and then what OAuth solution we built with that. And then we have a new feature launch that we rolled out last week that we're going to launch today that we'll walk you through. We'll go through a demo of OAuth, how it works, what is that new feature, and what are some caveats to consider as you look to build this out. We'll cover those resources as I walk you through the demo. We'll have links to everything, and then we'll do Q&A. So let's get going here. Okay, so Connect automatically sends real-time and envelope data to external applications. Like imagine a customer or you want to get a text message to your phone. Well, in this case, we're going to send like a message or a notification to a customer's application. So if you want to get like notified when something is occurring in Docusign, like whether a signer has signed an agreement or whether the envelope has fully been completed, you'll use Docusign to Connect to get an automated notification that these instances have occurred in your account. You know, we can pass the envelope documents, the certificate of completion, and any data within those records. And so this is an example of how I visually show this. So on the left, we have an envelope that's been opened. The opening of a document or an envelope may be something that you want your application to be notified about. So you could opt in to one of our first party options here. We have agreement actions, we have Salesforce, we have Google Drive, OneBox, all these different low code options that are very easy to set up today. And then we have option 2, which is our Developer Connect. This is what the majority of our customers are using. This is a very customized approach. It's very heavy on the configuration side on your end, but it's just another option where you can house data within your app, within your system, instead of storing it in a first or third party. So we're going to focus on the Developer Connect piece. We can take questions on the top 2, but this whole presentation will be about the developer side, about the custom connect. Okay, so I want to cover the 3 developer configurations that we have. We have an account level config. This will essentially listen to all events that you subscribe to within the account that your users are sending out. It's kind of that sender connect version. When a user sends an envelope out of the account, we will then send webhooks from that account to your application. We also have a new recipient connect. This is a couple years old, but this will notify you when agreements are coming into your account. Your users are actually recipients on Docusign envelopes. You can now get webhooks for inbound notifications, whereas the account level is more about outbound, focus on your senders. Recipient Connect is focused on inbound and what your users are receiving within your account. And then we have envelope level connect. This is specific just for specific envelopes, and it's an API only config, but allows you to be more granular on the notifications you want to get specifically just for one use case or a small subset of those. So I want to cover 1.0. This is our legacy model. It's still supported today. We're just not adding additional functionality. This was specifically designed for recipients and envelopes. And this provides you an API call of what's occurred, but it restricted our ability to tell you what was the triggering event. You know, an envelope can be completed and we'll send you a payload of recipient statuses, envelope statuses, all within that notification, but we never told you what actually triggered that. Okay, this action occurred, the recipient signed it. We're not actually sending you that. We're sending you an API call of a summary of what happened, not actually what occurred. So that was our legacy model, and this limited us. We couldn't create new events because we were using an API call instead of a true webhook model that we had. So what we launched last year is we have, Connect 2.0. So what we have is we added a new event model to the top parent of our payload. This will have an event down to URI, retry, config ID, API version, generated date, time, and data. These are 7 static parameters that we will have for every event in 2.0. And what this allowed us to do is move to more of a webhook model, an action-based model, and we can actually tell you what event occurred within that action. So a recipient was sent it, you'll be notified of that. A recipient signed it, you'll get an actual trigger point of when this occurred. And then we also have the envelope summary. This is the old Connect 1.0 model. We house that within our 2.0 model to have some backwards compatibility, so you can still consume old legacy envelope summaries that we had before. What this allowed us to do is, moving into this new model, this allowed us to create all new events that we have. We can create events around delegations, resigns, corrections, templates, Docusign click, which is elastic signing now, deletions, resends. This opened the gate for us to create all sorts of new events within Docusign, and you'll see a lot of those events in the account now rolled out, and we continue to roll out new products, new events because of this model. Okay, so let's dive more into the developer side of what we had. I just want to show a diagram. This is a typical flow when using Docusign Connect. We have a customer, they have an account, they have users sending envelopes out here on the left, and then they've gone into our settings page and set up a Connect event system where they set up a Docusign configuration, Connect, and specified an endpoint for them. They subscribe to statuses and the envelope data they want. And then within their organization on the right, they have a database, a listener, an application consuming those automated notifications that we pass. So, and what customers are doing with this is they're kicking off internal processes, they're doing quality control. Should we have sent this to the right person? Who's signing? Are there any corrections occurring? And then archiving completed documents, which is our largest use case. What I want to focus on is the passing of our payload to your listener. This is where we are going to dive into the security options that we have. So we're going to break it down a bit more. We're going to focus directly on where we pass it. So I want to show you the different mechanisms we have where we can secure the payload, and where on your end, as we're passing it to the listener, you can ensure that it's coming from Docusign, coming from us. It's not a spoof intent or a malicious actor trying to gain access to your system. So we have basic auth. This is a username, password. We've had this for a very long time. We have HMAC. This is about 4 or 5 years old. This is a hash-based message authentication code. It'll essentially send a hash within your message, and then it'll give you Connect keys that will allow you to verify the message and its contents. It essentially allows you to ensure that the message hasn't been tampered with, and when we pass it to your payload. And then we have mutual TLS. This is X509. It sends a valid certificate request during the TLS handshake protocol. This is initiated on the customer side. Once you initiate TLS, then the flow will kick off and our X509 flow will begin. This is what the majority of our customers use because it gives them a lot more control of what's going on. And then now we have OAuth 2.0. This is an open authorization protocol. Rather than sharing username and passwords and granting total access to your application or your auth server, we're going to enable OAuth, which gives you scoped access, much more secure option of what access we have and what we're passing to your application / listener. All right, so we're going to focus on OAuth at this point. Let's dive right in. When we were building OAuth, we had a lot of feedback over the last few years about what OAuth solution did you want versus what OAuth solution can we offer. The industry has a ton of different options. They have implicit grant, authorization code, resource owner. That's the wrap to basic auth. And we have client credentials, and then there's X509 MTLS within that. Then there's JWT. Then there's a specific X509 OAuth. So how do we know which one to build? We can't cover all of these for you, but we wanted to find the most simple, easy approach that you could implement that makes the most sense in a developer scenario. So the one we picked is client credentials. And we actually added the X509 on top of that I'll cover later. So what is client credentials? This is a much more straightforward version of OAuth. This is more around authorizing server to server request. It has that reduced scope. There's no end users at play. It's a lot easier for our customers and for our developers to understand. It's a much more straightforward approach. So that's why we picked this one. It covered the majority of our ask and allowed us to scale this appropriately. Like I said, we cannot build every single OAuth option out there. That's not scalable for either of us. So what is client credentials and how does this work? So I'm going to walk you through an OAuth flow. I showed you the diagram of how a customer uses Connect. Well, we're going to get even more granular. We're going to focus on the passing of a payload. So Docusign, an envelope's been sent, and Docusign Connect is passing a payload that the envelope's been sent to your listener. So within the new OAuth flow, and this is how Connect works today, but within the new OAuth flow, we're going to add an authorization server. This is your authorization server on your side. So before we pass a payload to your listener, you will go up and set up your authorization server credentials within Docusign. I will show you that later. And essentially, you will add within Docusign Connect the client ID, the client secret, any custom parameters you may have, and the token endpoint. These are credentials from your auth server, Azure, AWS, any of these entities. And you are adding these within Connect. And what Connect will do is when we're ready to pass a payload, we will package these credentials up using the client credentials grant type, and then we will pass them to your auth server. So at this point, we're requesting an access token. Once we pass that to your auth server will consume the payload we passed. It'll process whether it's an acceptable client ID, client secret, anything else you added. Then it'll pass an access token back to Connect. Connect will take that access token, add it on top of the payload within the header, pass that to your customer listener. And then your listener should verify that access token with your auth server, whether to actually accept the payload, send a 200 status back to us, or send an error code if something did not occur that was expected. So this is the OAuth flow in the diagram, and we'll continue to walk through this. So I want to focus on the part here where we're passing the request to your auth server. There are a lot of different ways to consume this payload. So I'm going to show you how we pass it, and I want to let you know how we pass it is not configurable. And what I mean by that is when we're passing those credentials to your auth server, we're going to post it to your auth server, and then we'll follow the generic content type that we have. And then we will do a base 64 authorization of your client ID, client secret. This is in the header. It will not go in the body. We don't have a mechanism for you to do that. So if your auth server is expecting the authorization credentials in the body, you'll need to configure it so it can recognize these credentials in the header. We've seen this occur with customers implementing auth today. And then in the body, we'll pass our grant type client credentials. This is a default parameter. You can't pass any other grant types. We will cover this for you. You don't have to add it as a custom parameter either. And then if you have scopes or audiences or any other additional custom parameters, that is how we will package them within the body. And this is the format or expected payload response that your authorization server will need to recognize. Okay, so I want to talk about the new release that we have within the OAuth flow. We're introducing a new integrator manage parameter. This allows partners or integrators to use their OAuth credentials for customer event messages. What I mean by that is OAuth for Connect must be set up in the account where the integrator key was created. This is the partner or integrator's account. You can then set integrator manage to true in both our API calls, our create config one or our event notification in the envelope, and Connect will use the partners or integrators credentials when sending notifications instead of that customer's account. And you can use this parameter for account level or those envelope event notifications that I showed you before. And this is only supported in the API. And I will walk through this in the demo, but let's walk you through the flow of what I mean by that. So let's say I have an integrator account. Let's say I'm an organization, I have like 20 accounts, and I want to use one integrator key for all of those. I don't want to have 20 integrator keys. So what we're going to do is when you set up that integrator key in that account, and you set up OAuth credentials for Connect within it as well, and then you set the parameter of integrator managed to true, you can create the config for that HR account with that client ID from the first account. You can create it for a mortgage account, any of your accounts. And what we'll do is instead of passing the security settings for the HR account to that listener, we will actually package up and use the integrator's account where you first created that integrator key. So what this will allow you to do is use one OAuth credentials, one integrator key for 25 of your accounts, instead of having to add those OAuth credentials into each 25 of them, or as a partner, having your customers set up those credentials for all of your partners. This is a very automated API developer center focus, and it's very simple. You have an integrator key, you set up OAuth credentials, you set the parameter we have when you're creating these configs in these new accounts, and we'll leverage the credentials within that. And I will walk you through what those parameters look like in the demo. So let's dive right into the demo. First, we're going to walk through a generic OAuth flow, showing you client credentials, setting it up, using it in Azure. We'll create an access token so you can see what this will look like. We'll walk through Postman, what the API calls look like. I'll cover the partner side as well that I just talked about. But let's log in. Let's get started. Okay. So first, I'll walk you through the UI. Then we'll go into Postman, and we'll walk through an Azure example that I have to demo. So you log into Docusign, and then I will go to my account. All right. So I'll go back to the home page. We'll start from the beginning here. Okay, so when you're in the home page, when you log in, you'll go to settings. Just want to set the base where Connect is at in case you don't know. If you don't have Connect enabled on your account, please reach out to our support team, and we can see what we can do to get that enabled for you. So you'll go down to integrations, you'll see Connect here, and then here's the Connect page. This is where OAuth needs to be set up. So you'll see we have a new OAuth 2 tab here, and then this is where I walked through the client ID, the secret, the authorization token URL, and then those custom parameters. This is where they need to be set up. Once you add all these credentials, you will have to go into the config still, and then well, let me get the credentials added. We'll do a new one here, but once I get the credentials added, you'll actually have to check the box in the config to actually apply it. But you have to have credentials added. But just to show you the config piece that you have to enable on the config still, even though you've added the credentials. Just adding the credentials doesn't apply to all configs. Okay, so let's walk through a flow here. I have a Postman collection here to share with you that we're going to walk through. So I have the post connect OAuth call. You'll see auth server client ID, secret, scope. That's the same things we have here. Same API calls that will feed into the UI. And then let's walk through an Azure flow. So I want to implement OAuth for Connect with Azure. So we have documentation and resources to walk you through a step-by-step guide of how this works. But I know when I'm setting up OAuth, I need the token URL, the client ID, the secret, and a scope for Azure. This is following their OAuth client credentials documentation. This is how we built this. This is what we look for. I'm not going to go through all this, but I want to show you these are references we use to implement with Azure correctly. So I have set up my own Azure portal. I have my own OAuth test, and I'll walk you through what we need here. So what you need here is you need the token endpoint here. There's quite a few here, and it may be different per your implementation, but for the majority of what we found is you just need this V2 token one. So you'll take that. That will be your auth server. That's what we're going to ask from the access token from. And then we need we got the token. I have my client ID here. I need that as well. And I'm making the call to Docusign here. I'm setting those OAuth credentials. So we got our client ID. And then you'll need a secret as well. This is a test account, so it's okay if you see these. But essentially, you'll create a new one here. I already have one here, so I'll take that. And you'll need the value, not the secret ID. One thing about the secret is these expire. They have a set time. Docusign won't know this, so make sure you have a record of when these expire. If they expire, you have to add a new one into Docusign. We cannot go get a new secret for you. It's just the way OAuth works. So we'll take that secret, we'll plug it into our parameter here. And then I do know when I'm implementing OAuth 2 with Azure, this is where you figure out the documentation of what scope, the default scope that you need. It's the application ID URI right here. And then you have to have the default suffix for it. This may not be the case for yours, but the majority it will. So I know in the overview, here's my application ID URI. I would take that and then we'll copy that out. And so I know that needs to be a scope for Azure. And then I have my .default at the end. So I have my credentials ready. Let's say I want to know beforehand if Docusign is going to get these credentials. We actually have this Postman collection here for Azure, Auth0, Okta, AWS. These are actually calling those same endpoints. This is outside of Docusign, but I have a call here, client credentials. Here's my scope. I have my client ID and secret in here. So this will allow you to send a call to Microsoft, like, oh, am I going to get a token here? 200 OK, cool. It expires this time. Here's that access token. This is actually what Azure is going to pass back to Docusign, and then this is what we're going to pass in the payload. So you can check before Docusign if an access token can be generated initially. If it can, and you input those same credentials within Docusign here, there's a high probability this flow is going to work correctly, or it should, and maybe there's an issue within Docusign or something going on here. So I'll pass my request. Now I have that request sent. We'll go back into Docusign, and now you see my client ID. We hash the secret. Here's my token your endpoint. Here's my scope. Save those. Those are set. And then we are going to pass. I already have a config set up with this. So we're going to send an envelope out so I can generate a payload. So there's my payload, sent status. So I have a config here. I already have config set up. I have OAuth checked. We'll be getting a request to my webhook.site endpoint here. Usually takes about 20-30 seconds for this to populate. We'll do a refresh. Looks like it came in. Okay, so I have my flow. I sent that envelope out. Now I have my payload. This is what your listener will consume. So we went to the auth server for Azure. We hit that token endpoint that I showed here. And then Microsoft passed this bearer authorization token here. Same token I just showed you. That's where the listener will talk to the auth server or however you implement that, and then accept the payload. But this is what the OAuth flow looks like in a generic sense. One thing we'll continue to cover here is I talked about that partner flow that I showed you before. So this is the OAuth flow. You see the access token. You saw the credentials I set. We're going to talk about the partner side, the integrator side, about how you can use one security mechanism credentials for a multitude of accounts. So the best way to walk you through this is, so like I was talking about before, when I set up an integrator key in my demo account or prod, if I promoted it, wherever these integrator keys originate, that's the one that we need to use to create the configs. So I have my 4D F here, this one. I created this in this account, 564. Now I know this originates here. And then I will set up OAuth here. I'll set the credentials at this point. And then let's say I want to create a connect config within my mortgage account. I'll use the mortgage account's credentials, but I will use the same integrator key because I don't want to have 20 integrator keys for 20 accounts. So I take the integrator key, I add that new account ID in here. I have my client ID here. I know it's here. And what you would set is OAuth to true, first of all. That will make sure OAuth is triggered. And then integrator managed, you'll set this to true. This is the new parameter that we just rolled out last week. This is how Docusign will know which credential or to kick off the partner flow. At that point, we'll know, okay, this client ID was used. Let's go to where that client ID's account originated, and then we will leverage those credentials. So I can take this client ID, I can apply this integrator key managed to, if I wanted to, all of these accounts, and it would use just these credentials. I wouldn't have to go into all of these and set up OAuth in all of them. That's what this allows for. So that's that partner side. We will have documentation and release notes coming out later this month into November. So be on the lookout for that. But wanted to show you something new we've just launched that we're really excited about. And as you test these things, please give us feedback. We love to learn and add on to this if you need additional pieces, or if there are use cases or probabilities we have not considered. Okay, so that is the OAuth for Connect demo. One caveat here I want to call out some red herrings is, like I said, we apply that grant type by default. So, and what I mean by that is you cannot add your own grant type. If you try to add your own grant type, we're going to hit you with an error like this. This custom parameter name is reserved. Reserved means DocuSign's already applied it. So you're not going to be able to add your own. Same with client ID. You're going to hit client ID is reserved. Same with secret. We see a lot of customers trying to add these because maybe the authorization server needs them within the body. So that's why we think we see customers doing this. But we reserve these by default because we need them to be in the header. And if we allow both of them to pass through, the authorization server will get confused and it won't. Why do I have two client IDs? It'll send an error back. So just to let you know, we will pass the client ID secret and that grant type by default. You don't need to add it. And the majority of the time, what we're seeing is custom parameters aren't always needed, but we wanted to make sure it was dynamic enough, an optional route where you can add what you need, like the auth0 flow. If you're using that, that requires an audience parameter here instead of the scope. Azure wants a scope. Auth0 in most cases, they want that audience. That's their type of scope. So, you would put audience here instead. And then there are many, many different custom OAuth authorization server providers out there. So we wanted to make sure we had an option that was very generic, so you can add in any parameters that you may need. But definitely consult with your authorization server team, your IT team, or whoever manages that to ensure you have the right credentials. And like I said, try to create access token before Docusign. If you can get the token here, you're already in a great place to implement it into Docusign. At that point, you would just apply the credentials, send an envelope out, or create a payload. And then, there's a high probability that the access token would occur. And if you don't see it, you can go to our logs. And let's see if I have one here. I think I have a failure I could show you. Actually, we'll go to the dashboard. I think I can show you those. Yeah, and then here, you can see the error of what might occur. Here's one. This is actually an OAuth error from Azure. I had an invalid client secret provided, and we will pass the error that the auth server passes back, so you have more details about what's going on, what error occurred, different things like that. Okay. All right, that's the demo. Walk through it all. I was supposed to cover this before, but I forgot. Sorry about that, Melissa. But this is what we covered. We generated an access token. I walked through the UI flow of setting it up, best practices, and then I walked you through the Postman API flow, getting those credentials in the call, and then the different auth server calls that you can reference, the main ones, Azure, AWS, and those. Resources. So we have a lot of resources for you. We'll give you the generic Docusign Connect guide. We'll talk about best practices with webhook management. And then we have a link for our new Connect 2.0 event-based model instead of the envelope summary model. And then OAuth for Connect, we have our generic page that will walk you through essentially what I did in the PowerPoint. We have 2 in the trenches post. We have one that will walk you through Azure, very similar to what I just did. And then we also have a very in the trenches post. This is for very technical parties, but you can actually add the MTLS certificate within the OAuth request that we passed. And I have some extra time, so let me cover that. And what I mean by that is, we'll go back a bit. When we are passing this request, this is an API request to your auth server. What we can do is we can actually add the MTLS TLS handshake. When you initiate on your side, it's this box right here. We would initiate this protocol when we were passing a payload, the envelope summary payload, this one. But we can actually, we made an enhancement about 6 months ago where we can actually, if you click both of these, we will actually pass it with our OAuth request as well. So you'll get it with the OAuth request if initiated. Then your auth server can have more security around the client credentials that we're passing. And then we'll also pass it, within the payload that we've always done. So that is that MTLS flow that I talked about. And we have a trenches post that will walk you through what that looks like, what it means, and some resources of how you can get it going. And then I have the Postman collection. I wanted to share this whole collection with you so you have easy tools to hopefully get up OAuth going, walking through the main ones. And then we have a FAQ, that we cover generic questions if I didn't answer them today within our documentation. And that is OAuth for Connect. And we will move on to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. So Cameron and Cole, do we have any questions that have come in so far that might benefit the whole audience? And you can go back and look at the ones that have been answered already.
Yeah, for sure. There was one, really, I think one of the first ones that had came through that I would like, Alan, maybe your input on. It was regarding if the sender and recipient are both in the account, will 2 webhook generate duplicate records for the same envelope? So I think it goes back to there was the recipient event along with that general envelope event. So it might be in regards to like send individual message in aggregate. But are you aware, does send individual message still apply when they would be using that recipient along with the envelope events?
Yeah, so I believe they're talking about, let's go back to the configs. So I believe they're asking if they set up account level, if they set up recipient connect, and I send an envelope out, and let's say I send an envelope out and I have a recipient on it. Yes, you will get 2 notifications for that. A recipient was sent at the account level because that's the sender base, and you will get a recipient sent at the recipient connect because it is technically an inbound envelope. What recipient connect looks for is, was there a user in my account and were they sent an envelope inbound? So yes, if you are the sender of it and you have both these configs set up, you will get duplicate messages. We don't actually see that occur quite a bit because if you are sending envelopes out, people just set up the account level one, and then they have the recipient one. If they're getting those inbound use cases, it's much more clear of when those use cases are there. If you're getting both and you don't, and you want a way to recognize that, within our payload, we actually pass the account ID. So let's say you wanted to filter out the ones that are originating from your account. you could have your queuing system recognize, oh, account ID XYZ, reject those requests or drop them, and then only recognize inbound those recipient events for account IDs outside of that GUID. That's how I would recommend you do it. But yes, you will get both.
Okay, awesome. And I see there's a new one that had just came in as well. It looks like the question is, so when Docusign makes a call to custom listener with the payload, it will include the OAuth token in the bearer form. Is that correct?
You repeat that one more time.
Yeah, and if it helps, it looks like it's in the open one as well, but it sounds like they're just asking on the form of the token. Is it in the bearer form?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. You'll get it. This is the industry standard bearer token. This is how we pass it. It will follow our IP ranges, similar to the payload here we'd pass. So we have those IPs that can be allow listed on our public website. Or if you need, like I said, with that firewall restriction, if you're using X509 or TLS, when we're trying to get the request, we'll add TLS. Within the payload here, we'll do OAuth and TLS as well when we're passing the actual token. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And then I'll send over that article with the list of IP addresses. Outside of that, are there any other restrictions you think that might be taken into account as far as like maybe using a custom firewall or things that might be valuable to keep in mind just to make sure the message does actually get through to the server?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you may need additional security. Like I said, most of the firewall is around TLS X509. That's really been the gateway. But we follow TLS 1.2 when we're passing a request. It's identical to the payload we pass. It has the same security mechanisms around it. So you can ensure that this is coming from Docusign. But if you need those additional mechanisms, we have those available. You could do OAuth plus HMAC. You could do OAuth plus TLS. The only thing you cannot do is you cannot do OAuth plus basic auth. They're very similar. OAuth is a scope to basic auth. And so we don't allow those both to be passed together because the auth server would get confused. So that's the only ones we don't support. But IP ranges, all of these can be used all at once, all together, or separately. It's just your choice for what your auth server or listener or firewall rules are.
Perfect. And there was one question around if these extra security mechanisms are required. And the answer is no, they're not required. But Alan, if you might be able to provide input on maybe when you might want to include these additional security parameters and what that might look like.
Yeah, we always recommend including them. You don't have to have any mechanisms. At the bare minimum, IP filtering with the TLS 1.2 flow we follow, HTTPS encryption, you should be okay. But we always recommend adding it on just in case. You never know what's going on out there. We want to make sure the information you're receiving to your listener is coming from us. We can't counter any spoofing or intent, but we want to give you the mechanisms where you can counter it if you think it might occur or may occur. So that's what these will allow for. And HMAC actually gives you more of an encryption, to ensure that the contents of the payload aren't tampered with. We have an option where you can just get the event, like a small version of the payload. Probably IP filtering is okay with that because you're just passing the small amount of information through the payload. But when you're getting down to recipient information, documents, different things like that, you want to have those additional security mechanisms just in case there is a malicious intent or someone out there trying to cause a lot of friction or problems within our flow.
Okay. Perfect. There is one in the chat window as well. It doesn't make total sense. So curious on your input. The question is OAuth integration managed. How can this be done through the UI? Is it supported right now?
Yep. It's not supported right now. The version we launched is just in the API, so it's just here. We're looking at a future phase where if, let's say you're a partner and you have your customers set up the Connect configuration, or you have someone in your org and you have a lot of accounts, we want to give them an option where they could input the right information in here. We're just working on that user experience of what that would be. But no, UI is not supported right now, but we are looking into it. It is purely an API solution with this, but it is on our mind of how we could go about this.
Perfect, and thanks. I see another one that just came in. Do I need an admin account to create the Connect functionality while linking it to the Power Form? So as far as I'm aware, the Power Form user is just going to be included under that all user section. So as long as they have access to Connect, they should be able to set that up. But Alan, if you have any additional thoughts there, that'd be great.
Our Connect configs are, you have to be an admin in the account. We have options in here. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. We have, you have to be an admin in the account, but we have delegated permissions where you can give access to just Connect. So you can get a more granular access to Connect if you want from your organization. But yes, you do need to be an account admin to set the config up. And then yes, like Cole said, the Power Form is a sender technically. So those users would be included in the configuration.
Perfect. And
okay, so Cole, I was just going to jump in. We do have a raised hand here, so I'll go ahead and allow them to talk, and you can ask your question. And you just need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey, cool. I have a quick question. So we use Docusign CLM to send out the e-signature for any document. Now we have a use case where we want to capture how many people have signed the envelope, right? But we are using CLM workflow. So what I want to capture is the signed envelope through webhooks. Can you share some insight on these and where can I read more on this?
Yeah, on the CLM side, so it is a Docusign envelope, correct? Or is it specific? Yeah.
It's a specific document, our templates, which we use in e-signature workflow. So basically, we have a CLM workflow with a e-signature step in it, and we use our template to send it out to n number of people to get it signed, right? Now I want to capture how many have signed, and I don't have a hold of a unique envelope ID at that point. So I'm just trying to see what could be a better way to handle this.
Yeah, I think one way you could tackle this is obviously you have the eSign account because you set up the template.
Right.
Well, that template has like a user owner, like it has one sender as the recipient. So what you could do is you could go into your eSign account, set up a config. That template lives in this account. So we'll send webhooks for it, even though it's integrated in eSign, because it's an envelope ID, because it's a template ID, as long as it originates in this account. And then what you could do is you could filter by that one template owner, the template sender. Whoever created the template is the sender in that case. And I believe you should be able to filter basically off that user, off the template owner, I believe. Would that be
is there a way to
possible
talk in
push play?
detail about this? Like, is there a way I can reach out to you or someone for more detailed discussion on this?
Yeah, I
of
can
course.
take that, Alan.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have our resources that we can go back to toward the end here. But you can reach out to us at developers@docusign.com. You can also go to Stack Overflow and take Docusign API. Or you can place a support ticket and we'll share the links to all of those as we wrap up.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Anything else? All right. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. All right. I think, Cole, I was wondering if we've covered the can we use our firm-based Okta OAuth? Is that one we can cover for everybody?
For sure. And Alan, you might have input on that one. Basically, the question was just, can we use our firm-based Okta OAuth? So if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we support any authorization server, and we've tested with Okta. You know, I have this probably won't work right now, it's a little old, but we've tested with Okta, grant type, client credential scope, and we have customers using Okta. Great, we're getting authorization access tokens from them. So yes, you can use Okta. It just depends on whether your Okta instance can support client credentials or not. So that's what I would work with your IT team, authorization server team, just to ensure that that flow works for you. But yes.
Perfect.
And it looks like we don't have any open questions. Are there any from our common FAQs that might benefit the audience?
Yeah, there are a few there. So there's one around, will DocuSign request a new access token that is close to expiring?
Yes. Okay. That's a great question. So remember I told you the client secret could expire and we won't cover that. Well, but when we're getting the access token, when we're doing the flow to get this token here, this will have an expiration. I showed you in Azure here, my token lives for this long. It'll expire in this time. We will automatically retry for a token if there's an error. One, if there's an error message. If Microsoft sends back a 400, 500, whatever it may be, DocuSign will have a retry mechanism for that. And then if it's close to expiring, we'll go out and reach out for one. So we're not getting expired errors. We'll do it, 5-10 minutes before, just to make sure there's no outages occurring. But yes, we will request a new access token if it's failing or if it's close to expiring, because we get that information back from the auth server.
Perfect. And then on a similar note, will DocuSign request a new client secret that is close to expiring?
No, yeah, I covered that one earlier. No, we don't store these secrets. We don't know when they're supposed to expire. Those are very personal PII within the auth server. You'll have to add a new one back within the config. So make sure you track that on your side of when that is expiring. Usually they say within here.
Perfect.
Of when that
Okay.
will.
Yeah, and it looks like the remainder of the FAQs have been addressed throughout the other portions of this call, and it doesn't look like there are any additional in the QA either.
Awesome. Okay, we can go ahead and wrap this up then. Helen, if you could go back to the resources slide, I'll cover the common ones for DocuSign. Great, thank you. All right, so on the right side of the slide, you'll see all of our common resources. I've dropped these into the chat as well, but not to worry, you will get them in about a week following the webinar via an email, as well as the recording. So we'll share everything that we covered today, and if we didn't get to like a question or there's something you think of later, you can feel free to reach out to us at developers@docusign.com. And this team will follow up with you afterwards. You can also place a support ticket at developers.docusign.com/support. Stack Overflow, you can go there, stackoverflow.com, and tag us at DocuSign API for community response. We also have a number of upcoming webinars. You can feel free to register and join those as well. Any number of our API office hours that are coming up, we have a slew of them in November, December. Our next one in November in Seattle is November 7th. December 5th will be live at 10 a.m. Pacific time from Seattle and 10 a.m. GMT -3 live from Brazil. That one will be in Portuguese. December 7th will also be coming to you live at 1 p.m. AEDT, live from Sydney, Australia. So feel free to reach out to us, whatever way works best for you. Again, I dropped those into the box there, or the chat for you to take a look at. And be sure to also take our post-webinar survey that'll pop up in the browser as you exit Zoom. Tell us how we did and what you'd like to see for future topics. Now, finally, I would like to thank Alan for presenting and demoing. You did awesome, thank you. And Cole and Cameron for addressing all the great questions that came in today. You rock as always. And thank you to all of you, our attendees, for joining us. Have a great remainder of the day, everyone.